They claimed space was a shared legacy, a beacon of peace, unity, and enlightenment among civilizations. That was before the Terran exclusion zone blazed across every galactic star map, a crimson warning like a death's head marking cursed waters. It wasn't an empty threat. No ship or probe that dared to breach the boundary ever returned no signals, no wreckage, no survivors. Only silence. The first time I saw it, the council chamber map displayed the zone in arcs of pulsing red, ominously, rhythmic like a heartbeat. Back then, I was a diplomatic attach under the Velkai emissary. They called it the Human Ghost Zone, a scar on the galaxy's map. But we knew better humans weren't gone. They were waiting. My name is Commander Bramhalden, once of the Earthborn Fleet, though fleet is a relic of the past. Earth doesn't maintain navies anymore. Doesn't need to, not after the year of the betrayal. Like all tragedies, it began with peace. When humanity joined the Galactic Union, we were hopeful, idealistic. We shared technology, culture, even blood. But trust given freely was met with chains. It started subtly, trade deals that drained. Earth patents that robbed Terran ingenuity, and treaties rewritten mid-discussion. 1,000 cuts bled humanity of its dignity. The final blow came with the Treaty of Garon's Hollow, sold as a security measure to contain Earth's supposed aggression. But in truth, it was fear that turned cowards cruel. They seized our colonies, declared Mars a neutral resource hub, and unleashed their harvesters, leaving our settlements to wither. They dismantled our navy, called it peace, and then they came for our children. No one speaks of Project Sanctum anymore, hidden in classified archives. But I remember. I saw the abductions, the so-called rehabilitation centers, indoctrination camps meant to strip humanity from humans. We begged for justice. But the Council's response was silence, the same silence that now greets any vessel crossing into Terran space. Then came the burn. Earth vanished, cloaked beneath a blackout field. No signals, no distress calls, just gone. A fleet was dispatched to investigate. It vanished too. That was a decade ago. Rumors have since festered, whispers of extinction, of savagery, of a virus consuming humanity. But I know better. I've seen them. 6 years ago, I stole a Vajan freighter and crossed into the exclusion zone, prepared for death, but desperate for answers. What I found wasn't destruction. It was worse. I found ordered discipline, evolution. Humanity hadn't disappeared. It had adapted, was watching, crossing the boundary. I expected annihilation, an instant death from automated grids, said to atomize intruders. Instead, there was only silence, suffocating and vast. My instruments failed. Galactic positioning, council beacons, tracking all went dead. In their place, faint frequencies pulsed, rhythmic and deliberate. Like music for an audience that wasn't me. Hours passed before I saw it. No warning, no sensors, it was just there. A human ship, black as the void, its geometry sharp and unnatural. A predator in stillness. No lights, no insignias, just presence. It didn't hail or fire. It didn't need to. It mirrored my every move, a shadow with surgical precision. When I slowed, it slowed. When I accelerated, it matched. A silent dance of dominance, and then it vanished, not in a burst of light or a jump, but simply gone. That's when I understood. These weren't the humans I remembered, dreamers and scientists, diplomats and traitors. These were something else entirely. It's ghosts forged in iron, children raised by betrayal, built for vengeance. That's the only way to describe what I found. Days blurred into one another in the exclusion zone, time losing all meaning. Then I stumbled upon it, not Earth itself, not yet, but a relay station orbiting an unnamed moon. It hung between the remnants of the old Mars trade route and the asteroid belt. It's a skeletal relic. The station looked lifeless, charred metal, shattered windows, debris drifting like bones in still water. Cautiously, I approached and docked manually. Systems resisted at first, then relented, almost as if something inside wanted me there. The interior was cloaked in darkness, not the kind born of emergency power failure. but a deeper void, as if light itself was too frightened to linger. The corridors echoed my every step. Rusted signs still bore the emblem of the Terran Alliance, forgotten mark of a species once celebrated among the stars. Consoles were gutted, screens shattered, yet something about the place felt alive. Not in a tangible way, more like it remembered me. Then came the voice, calm male, unmistakably human. You shouldn't have come. I froze, spinning around. Nothing. The voice wasn't over, comes. It was in the room itself. I'm not here to harm, I said, raising my hands cautiously. I'm Bram Halden, former Earthborn. I know who you are, the voice replied. The air grew heavy, oppressive. You were at Europa during the evacuation. You smuggled children off-world during the purge. I did what I could. I stammered, heart pounding. I thought everyone else was gone. I thought humanity was dead. There was a pause, a bitter edge creeping into the reply. Humanity was dead. What you see now? It's something else. Lights flickered on, one by one, illuminating a path through the desolate station. I followed. What choice did I have? Trail led to what looked like an operations center, a relic of a bygone era. In the middle of the room sat a chair, and in it a man. He looked ordinary at first glance, pale skin, short black hair, a worn jumpsuit, but his eyes, those were wrong, too steady, too cold, eyes that had seen too much and would never blink again. You're lucky, he said flatly. We usually shoot first. I'm not here to spy, I replied quickly. I left the council. I know what they did. I've seen it. I came for answers. And now you have them, he said, voice unyielding. Leave. No. That made him shift, a subtle twitch. I stepped closer. I didn't cross half the galaxy to leave empty-handed. I know what they did, the treaties, the betrayals, the children. I lived it. But this, the silence, the ghost stories. It's not enough. They think you're gone. I want them to know you're not. He rose slowly, almost deliberately, studying me. Why? Because I'm tired of their lies, I said, my voice firm. Because they made us weak, and we paid for it in blood? Because if anyone deserves fear, it's them. Something shifted in his expression, cold amusement, knowing. A faint, sharp smile. You're not the first to come here like that. Most don't leave. Fewer survive. But maybe you're the kind who needs to see for himself. He tapped a panel. A hidden door hissed open, flooding the room with light. Welcome to Bastion, he said. The last city of Earth. What lay beyond shattered every belief I'd held. Earth wasn't dead, had been reborn. Towering structures rose from scorched plains, machines flying without thrusters. Construction drones swarming like insects to shape an artificial skyline. No civilians, only soldiers, engineers, and builders, ooming with singular purpose. It was a fortress, a machine city designed for war. I was led through winding corridors beneath Bastion, descending into the depths where the old Earth governments had once hidden bunkers and research labs. These remnants of a fractured past had been repurposed into something far more dangerous. They called it the Crucible. Here they forged the next generation, not with lectures or ideals, but with pain and discipline. Combat drills, brutal simulations, and survival exercises were their lessons. In one room, teenagers disassembled alien weapons with surgical precision. In another, augmented soldiers ran zero-gravity combat maneuvers, their movements exact and unrelenting, everywhere. Old human war banners hung beside a new emblem, a black gauntlet crushing the sigil of the Galactic Council. What is this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The man guiding me didn't respond at first. He gazed out across the expanse of the Crucible, then spoke one word. Insurance. He turned to me, his expression hard. We're coming back, he said. Not to negotiate, not to plead. We've worn the chains. Now it's their turn to feel what fear tastes. Like, why wait? I asked. His eyes locked onto mine, cold and unwavering. Because we're not finished evolving. And because the longer they believe we're ghosts, the louder they'll scream when we finally return. Before I left, he showed me one final thing. Deep beneath the crucible, in a chamber brimming with an eerie hum, I saw it, a sphere, pulsating with raw energy. "What is that?" I asked, a chill creeping through me. "It's not a bomb," he said flatly. "It's worse." "What does it do?" His gaze didn't waver. "It speaks. And when the time comes, its voice will be the first thing they hear." As I boarded my ship, the realization hit me like a blow. The Galactic Council hadn't just made enemies with their betrayal of Earth, they had forged predators. Every species that stood by and watched humanity burn without lifting a hand would soon understand why no one dared to enter human space. This time, humans wouldn't wait for their oppressors to come to them. I left Bastion with more than answers. I left with a curse. That place had imprinted itself on MIT's silence, its precision, the eyes of its young soldiers burning with cold, trained fury. Even with my freighter on autopilot, my mind stayed trapped in the crucible. Earth hadn't just survived the betrayal. It had weaponized it. It wasn't just a city, it was a fortress, a machine of war brought to life. I was guided through labyrinthine corridors deep beneath Bastion, into spaces where Earth's old governments had once concealed bunkers and research labs. Those remnants of the past had been transformed into something far more ominous. The Crucible. This was where the next generation was forged, not with lectures or diplomacy, but with unyielding discipline. Pain was the foundation, survival its lesson. I saw teenagers dissecting alien weapons with surgical precision, and augmented troops executing zero-gravity combat drills with ruthless efficiency. The air was heavy with purpose, and every wall bore the remnants of humanity's past. Banners of the old war era now accompanied by a new insignia. Black gauntlet crushing the sigil of the Galactic Council. "What is this?" I asked, breaking. The charged silence. The man guiding me didn't respond immediately. His gaze swept over the expanse before he finally said one word. "Insurance." After a pause, he added, "We're coming back. Not to negotiate, not to beg. We've endured chains long enough. Now it's their turn to learn the taste of fear." "Why wait?" I challenged. He turned, his expression as hard as stone. "Because we're not done evolving. And because the longer they believe we're ghosts, the louder they'll scream when we finally return." Before I left, he led me to one last chamber space, buried deep within the crucible. In its center sat a sphere, alive with pulsating energy. "What is that?" I asked, dread creeping into my voice. "It's not a bomb," he replied flatly. "It's worse." "What does it do?" His eyes locked onto mine, unflinching. "It's our voice. When the time comes, it will speak first." As I boarded my freighter, a chilling realization struck me. The Galactic Council hadn't just created enemies, they had forged predators. Every species that stood by and watched humanity burn would soon understand why no one dared to enter human space anymore. This time, humanity wouldn't wait for its enemies to come. I left Bastion with more than just answers. I left with a curse. That place had carved itself into MIT's silence, its ruthless precision, the eyes of its young recruits. They didn't burn with hope or idealism, but with a cold, calculated fury. Even as my ship flew on autopilot, my mind was trapped in the crucible. Humanity hadn't merely survived the betrayal, it had distilled its suffering into something terrifyingly focused. What haunted me most wasn't their technology or their weapons, it was their patience. The Council had stripped humanity of its allies, its identity, its freedom. Yet instead of crumbling, humanity had refined its pain into something no alien species, not even the mighty Voss or Eurith could comprehend. Resentment forged into resolve. When I finally crossed into neutral space, I contacted an old comrade, Drek, a half-retired mercenary whose life I'd once saved during the Vakari riots. We met at Shell 7, a dilapidated orbital station near Garen's Reach. The moment I docked, Soren greeted me with a weapon drawn. I thought you were dead. He growled, or worse, converted. Nice to see you too, I replied, unflinching. Put the gun down, Drek. I've seen worse things than you lately. He studied me for a moment, then slowly lowered the weapon. You went in, didn't you? I nodded. Saurin. Exhaled sharply, shaking his head. Then you're even dumber than you look. They're not gone, are they? They're waiting, I said, and what they've built, it's beyond anything we imagined. Wordlessly, Soren poured 2 glasses of something that barely passed as whiskey. He slid one across the table and stared at me. I always said the council would regret what they did to Earth, he muttered. But I figured we had more time. We don't, I replied, draped in synthetic silks and puffing on imported vapor leaves. Vernikas lounged as though the past had forgotten him. That illusion shattered when the lights over his booth flickered and died. Not the whole room, just his booth. Then came the sound. A scream. Not his. One of the women beside him slumped forward, blood leaking from her ears, dead. The second tried to flee, but collapsed mid-step, crumpling like a marionette with its strings cut. The guards reacted, weapons raised, but there was no attacker. No gunfire. Just death. Ekas trembled, his voice breaking as he barked. Who's there? Who dares? A whisper answered, though no one could see its source. You watched them starve. He spun, searching for the speaker, but the room was empty. Then his body convulsed hard and violent, as though something inside him were tearing its way out. He dropped to his knees, retching black bile onto the pristine marble floor. The crowd screamed. Someone called for security. But by the time they arrived, Ekas was no longer human. Hollow eyes, a missing tongue. Carved into his chest with surgical precision were the words, "Your hunger fed our fire." No one touched the body. They didn't need to. Everyone knew what it meant. Another name crossed off the list. I left the drift immediately. My face was too recognizable, and the whispers had started again. The humans are back. They're killing us, one by one.
It wasn't
fear anymore, it was resignation. Entire sectors withdrew from council oversight. Trade halted. Ambassadors were recalled. Species that once lorded over Terrans now treated human-shaped shadows as death incarnate. Every flicker of movement became a threat. Every Terran ship, no matter how decrepit, was seen as a war machine in disguise. I traveled next to the Halmer Fringe, a forgotten cluster of mining worlds ruled by corporate slavers. That's where I found her. She gave no name, only an alias. Wraith, Bastionborn, Crucible-trained. And unlike anything I'd ever encountered, not enhanced but perfected, she moved like a thought, soundless and invisible. For hours, she watched me before speaking. Her first words chilled my blood. You followed the list. I didn't deny it. I needed to see. Why tell me anything? I asked. Because your voice still carries, she said, her tone devoid of warmth. Because you remember pain and you want me to spread fear? She tilted her head, a gesture almost human. Fear spreads itself. You're just the wind that fans the fire. What's the plan? The endgame? There's no end. She said simply, there's only balance. We remove what tipped the scales. When the ashes settle, they'll rebuild in our image. Vengeance isn't justice. No, she said quietly. It's better. Should have feared her, maybe. I did, but more than fear, I felt conviction. Not because she spoke like a zealot, but because every word she said had already been proven true. Every corpse on the list, every council screamed they were evidence. I remembered Earth the way it used to be. Loud, chaotic, flawed. We bled one. Another more than we bled others. But we bled honestly. Now, we didn't bleed at all. We made others do it for us. The fifth name on the list was a bureaucrat and no one. He'd authorized experiments on Terran prisoners using psychic dampeners. Rumor had it the victim still screamed in the void. He was found days later, floating naked outside his station. No breach, no suit. Just frozen, grinning. That was the pattern. Impossibilities. Murders as messages. performances as warnings. The council abandoned pretense. Issuing an emergency decree, all humans outside the exclusion zone were to be detained or expelled. Some resisted. Others disappeared before orders reached them. Bastion didn't need more enemies. It only needed the illusion that guilt was universal. By the seventh name, I felt it myself. Not guilt. Not shame. Purpose. I'd spent years drifting, trying to forget the war, trying to escape the betrayal that burned every time I closed my eyes. But now, I had a direction. I contacted Wraith again, this time with a name of my own. It's not on Bastion's official list, but one I'd carried for decades. Admiral Vern Eckes. He ordered my squad into Europa's ice fields without backup. I said, half died freezing. The rest bled out. No medals, no funerals, just forgotten graves buried under corporate reports. Wraith didn't hesitate. Where? Gavros Prime. Retired. Living in luxury. Then he dies slow. I didn't ask how. I just watched as she vanished into the shadows, leaving the galaxy one shade darker. The night before it happened, I couldn't sleep. Not from guilt that had died when Earth went dark. It was something colder, a pulse under my skin. Like the universe itself was holding its breath. ECAS wasn't just a name. He was my ghost. 2 decades ago, he justified my squad's death as tactical containment tech-spendable assets in a low-probability operation. The survivors, myself included, were discarded like scraps. He retired with honors, built a mansion on Gavros Prime, surrounded himself with luxury. Wraith called it Cleansing Day. We've been watching ISOS for months, she told me. You gave us the location. This one is yours to witness. Her eyes scanned the estate. As we entered silent, unarmed, yet more dangerous than any arsenal, the guards were dead before they knew what hit them. We moved like ghosts through halls adorned with spoils of war, a Urith sunstorm canvas, a Vicari flame sculpture, even a stolen Terran painting. The irony made me sick. We found him in his study, seated in a recliner, watching old footage of himself. Speeches, medals, handshakes with council delegates. He didn't turn. I was wondering when you'd come, he said softly. Wraith circled behind him, a silent reaper in human form. I needed a distraction on another front, I said, my voice low and steady. You fed us to ghosts. Ekas nodded, a slow, deliberate motion. Yes, I did. He didn't flinch. He didn't beg. You think your honesty buys you mercy? I asked. No, he replied, his tone calm, almost resigned. But perhaps understanding. I laughed, hollow, bitter sound. Not because it was funny, but because he actually believed it. I understood the moment I walked into Bastion, I said. I understood what you and the council created. He turned slowly, his old, clouded eyes meeting mine. They weren't afraid. I gave you clarity, he said, his voice firm. Purpose. Before the betrayal, humans were soft, fragmented, petty. It was our betrayal that made you this. You should thank me. Wraith stepped forward then, her presence cutting through. The air like a blade. For the first time, I saw her face in full light, young, barely 30, but her eyes. Her eyes were ancient. They had seen death and found purpose in it. She knelt beside Ekas, pulling a small device from her satchel. Sphere, metallic and faintly glowing blue. His breath hitched. You know what that is? He asked. A flicker of fear finally breaking through his calm. She didn't answer immediately. Then coldly she said, It's history. Yours. She pressed the device to his temple. The sphere activated instantly, its glow intensifying. Ekas's body went rigid, and his eyes widened as the device took hold. Then he began to speak. Not words confessions. Every order, every decision, every lie. The memories were ripped from him, one after another, forcing him to relive them aloud. His voice cracked, first with anger, then despair. Wraith removed the device, standing silently over Ekas's lifeless body. Why? I asked. Because the galaxy needs receipts, she said, not just bodies. We left the estate untouched. By morning, the confession had spread like wildfire. Bastion's networks were surgical in their precision. Select council members woke to the entire file, in their private comms. Some denied its authenticity. Others fell silent. A few tried to run. None succeeded. Gavro's Prime declared a lockdown, claiming an unknown terrorist cell was responsible. The media spun it as an isolated incident, but no one believed that anymore. The body count was too deliberate, the messages too pointed. Those with blood on their hands started sleeping with one eye open. That's when the council made its first public misstep. It retaliated. A joint strike targeted a Terran freighter crossing neutral space. 5 human civilians were killed. The council claimed they were insurgents the next day. The Gavari embassy on Joran Prime was leveled in a single, precise explosion. There was no trace of the attacker, no message left behind. None was needed. The war had begun. Not with fleets or invasions, but with a whisper that grew into a scream. The galaxy finally understood. No species dared enter human space, not because humans wouldn't let them, but because they might not return whole, or worse, they might return knowing the full weight of their own crimes. Wars don't begin with a bang anymore. They start with hesitation, missed calls, nervous glances during council sessions, a fleet that doesn't respond to a distress signal, a senator falling silent mid-speech when the lights flicker. Now, everyone watched the shadows knot. The stars I observed from the edges as the kill list dwindled. Over half the names had been struck off. 12 silenced. 6 more vanished runaways who knew they were next, but had nowhere left to go. Their wealth couldn't shield them. Their titles meant nothing. Bastion wasn't hunting power, restoring balance. But something changed after Gavro's Prime. The killings weren't quiet anymore. Roch called it the turn. It's not just punishment now, she said. It's pressure. I didn't need her to explain. I saw it myself. The Arith system collapsed in a single day, not from fire, but from fracture. 3 key planets declared secession from the Council, denouncing past war crimes committed against humanity. Entire towns pledged neutrality or even sympathy to Bastion. Riots erupted in alien cities, fueled by workers, students, even defecting soldiers demanding justice, truth, and accountability. The Council tried to frame it as human manipulation, but the people weren't buying the lies anymore. Decades of deception had festered too long. By the time the 14th named fella, former diplomat whose sanitized role in the Terran child reconditioning camps, was finally exposed, the cracks in the galaxy had widened into chasms. I was at Sigma. Verge, a sprawling transport hub. When everything finally broke, a combined Urith invasion fleet entered orbit under the pretense of inspection. Their true goal was to root out sympathizers and seize Terran cargo. They underestimated just how many sympathizers they were dealing with. It started as whispers. Then a soldier was shot. Another followed. The power grid failed when it came back. Online, half the station was gone. Sabotage, strategically planted explosives, weeks in the making. Vents flushed soldiers into the void. Drones were hacked and turned on their handlers. The left side of the station collapsed, spiraling into the planet's gravity well. Over 12,000 dead. The surviving command center bore a single, stark message, painted in red. You do not get to forget us. I escaped only because I wasn't meant to die there. Bastion had agents embedded on the station, moving like ghosts through the chaos. One pulled me into a service shaft minutes before the breach. I never saw their face. You're still useful, they said before vanishing. From that moment, the galaxy began devouring itself. Trade routes shut down. Alliances fractured. Trust became poison. Everyone was either a target or a traitor. Even the neutral species started picking sides, not because they believed in Bastion, but because they feared being next. The stars were full of cowards. In desperation, the Council pulled its fleets from the outer colonies, fortifying every major world. They imposed curfews, ramped up surveillance, and criminalized dissent. But oppression has a way of backfiring. When people see fear in their oppressors' eyes, they don't run, they rise. Entire populations began declaring support for the Terran cause not out of love for humanity, but because the enemy of their enemy had become something righteous, something unkillable. That was the brilliance of Bastion. They didn't need to win battles. They made fear fight for them. I returned briefly to Shell 7 and found Soren drunk, laughing at a cracked screen broadcasting council propaganda about resisting the so-called Terran uprising. He poured me a drink, slurring, "They're late to the funeral. This war ended the day Earth went dark. They still think they can control the narrative," I said. "Let them," he scoffed. "Their words are hollow now. It's not about stories anymore, it's about memories." He was right. Everywhere I went, memories were awakening. Old Terran sympathizers emerged from hiding. Children of refugees formed quiet networks. Non-humans who had lived, loved, and bled alongside. Terrans began to speak. They told their stories. Stories about the purges, the mining camps, the forced sterilizations, the education centers that rewrote human history to paint Earth as the villain. And for the first time, the galaxy was listening. No amount of council broadcasts could stop the truth from bleeding through. That was Bastion's real weapon. Not ships. Not guns. Remembrance. Soon after Sigma Verge fell, I received a message from Wraith. One word. Soon. I didn't need to ask what it meant. The final phase was beginning. I traveled to a neutral moon called Harrow's Fall. Remote, cold, and quiet, it had once been the site of a black site interrogation center for Terran defectors. Now, it was dust a memory turned meeting ground. There were 5 of us, ex-military, Terran-born, forgotten. Wraith arrived last, laying out the plan. Bastion wouldn't invade the council. They would expose it. A single, coordinated strike on a broadcast network, reaching over 60 systems, not to kill, not to threaten, but to show the galaxy the truth. Records, footage, eyewitness accounts. Proof of every crime the council had buried. Every atrocity they had committed against Earth. And this time, they wouldn't be able to bury it again. I looked at the others. Tired faces, hardened eyes. We weren't heroes. We were just done. Pretending the galaxy was good. "We're not trying to make them love us," Wraith said. "We're making sure they never forget us again." I nodded, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was part of something real. The plan would go into motion in 2 weeks. I left Harrow's Fall, knowing the storm was coming. War for land or glory, but a reckoning. One built on truth, sharpened like a blade. When it fell, no species, no government, no empire would dare enter human space again. Because now they understood, we weren't victims. We weren't survivors. We were the reckoning they had begged the stars to forget. There was no grand launch, no trumpets, no fleets cutting through the stars. It began with a flicker. Every major broadcast channel council, controlled or otherwise, blinked out for a single second at precisely 2:07 Galactic Standard Time. Most viewers dismissed it. Then it happened again, 27 minutes later, and again. This time the static stayed. Across the galaxy, every screen went dark. When the signal returned, there were no anchors, no music, no studios, just a face. Mine. "My name is Bram Halden," I began, my voice steady. "Former soldier, former servant of the Galactic Council. A man who once believed in peace until I saw what peace cost my people." I had recorded the message 3 days earlier on Harrow's Fall. My face was chosen not for its importance, but for its familiarity, a relic of a forgotten species. Behind me, the video shifted to archival footage, real, unedited. It showed Earth's dismantling, freighters hauling stolen resources, children dragged from their homes, entire cities bombed into submission, interrogation chambers, genetic experiments, and starvation reports signed by smiling diplomats. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. "This is what the council built," I said, my voice guiding them through the horrors. "Not unity. It's not peace. Control. And when they couldn't control us, they tried to erase us." The shift came subtly, then all at once. The broadcast turned darker, showing the camps. Images of Terran prisoners, malnourished, beaten, experimented on, silent rows of women forced into sterilization wards. Boys turned into controlled drones through neural slicing. Survivors' testimonies echoed alongside confessions from defected non-human doctors. They called us volatile, dangerous, I said. But the truth is simpler. They envied us. They feared what would happen if we stood as equals. The broadcast lasted precisely 27 minutes. It ended with a single message. No species enters human space because now they remember why they shouldn't. Silence followed not because the signal cut, but because the galaxy didn't know how to respond. I sat alone, deep in a Bastion relay bunker, listening to the echoes across thousands of channels. Some denied it. Others screamed for proof. The smartest ones stayed silent. They knew it was real. Council HQ went into lockdown, scrambling with emergency summits and accusations of cyber warfare. But none of it mattered. The people had seen the truth. Riots broke out in 7 major council-aligned systems within hours. Police stations burned. Military barracks were bombed from within by their own soldiers. On Chatter 9, alien students occupied their governor's estate, broadcasting their own confessions, how they supported the council, how they stayed silent when Terran children disappeared. Across neutral worlds, Bastion banners began appearing. Not flown, but carved it permanently into walls and metals, silent and unyielding. WRAITH sent me one final message. A data packet, untraceable, encrypted. Inside was a list, planets where the Council was mobilizing for a counterstrike. A preemptive assault. They weren't waiting for Bastion to strike again. They were going to hit first. Her message was simple. Let them. Now the people know. Let the Council show the galaxy who they really are. It was genius. Bastion didn't need to win a war of weapons. It had already won the war of memory. The moment the Council fleets opened fire on systems sympathetic to the Terran cause, the galaxy would turn against them. I stepped outside the bunker that night. The stars above were cold and distant, but they didn't feel far anymore. They felt ours. The Council struck first. Their fleets rained fire on the worlds listed in Wraith's data packet. Villages burned. Refineries and communication arrays shattered. Planets labeled sympathizers were bombed into submission. But the damage had already been done. For the first time, the Council was the aggressor caught in their own crimes. Every system targeted flipped overnight. Civilians rose up. Soldiers turned on their commanders. Captured bases exposed more evidence. Broadcasts hacked Council channels to show human refugees now welcomed. Healed and clothed, the narrative shifted again. The Council became the guilty ones. Worlds declared independence. Regional alliances fractured. Economies collapsed and reformed. Around human-neutral coalitions, for the first time in over a century, Earth wasn't alone. They called it the Reckoning. It wasn't a military campaign. It was a moral uprising fueled by truth and vindicated by justice. In orbit above a reformed Earth Prime, I stood on a Bastion cruiser, watching the Council flagship retreat. Wraith stood beside me, silent as ever. Below us, the Council's fleet burned its own banners, throwing them into the void. Some systems declared neutrality. Others pledged allegiance to Bastion. The galaxy had chosen its future. What now? I asked her quietly. She turned, her face hard, her eyes sharp now. We rebuild, she said. Not to dominate, but to lead. To show a different path. I thought of the crucible, of the voice, the weapon Bastion never used, not for bombs, but for revelation. I asked her about it. She nodded and said, "We'll need it. After the reckoning comes accountability. Some of our own will lead. Others will stand trial. The galaxy isn't peaceful again, not yet, but it's honest." The final act unfolded on the Council's own grounds. The Grand Hall once used for peace debates was cracked and scarred, marked by human banners. I entered with Bastion's truth delegation. Humans, Urith Voss, Gavi defectors. They carried data, Footage, signed affidavits. The council sat across from us. Many seats were empty leaders who had fled or fallen, and as we laid out the truth, piece by piece, the galaxy finally saw what it had done. This wasn't vengeance. It wasn't war. Some council members fled. Others were crippled by public outcry, by their own shame. I stepped forward. I didn't introduce myself. I didn't need to. The galaxy already knew my face. The galaxy already knew my stories. I laid the charges before. The Mon paper, on holoscreens. Starvation, genetic experimentation, mass silencing, forced disarmament, assault on planetary sovereignty, each line a ledger entry in the book of their crimes. The council sat in silence. They looked tired, broken, afraid. When I was done, I said, "You stripped humanity of its life, its agency, its rights. It's time to give back what you stole." And then the hall fell silent. Votes were cast. Verdicts read, guilty. On every count, truth settled over the room like a weight. The council had no defense, no more lies. Penalties were declared. Seed fleets surrendered to neutral coalitions. Universal reparations established. A galactic tribunal to oversee reconstruction. Key council members were stripped of power, some sentenced to exile, others forced into retirement. I stood among Bastion leaders as the sentences were read. No cheers, no fireworks, just quiet silence. Full of weight and consequence, then came motion. Several former council officials stepped forward, their faces marked with tears, relief, shame. One by one, they signed the treaty. A human delegate stepped up next, young, wounded from one of the rescue missions. Her steps faltered, but her voice was steady. "We didn't survive to rule," she said. "We survived to live. We survived to remember." No speech followed. None was needed. The assembly nodded and gave her the pen. And in that moment, galaxy shifted, again not driven by vengeance, but by remembrance. I used to think victory would feel like triumph fireworks over the ruins of our enemies. Justice, carved into the bones of those who betrayed us. But standing here now, staring down at Earth from the tribunal's observatory deck, I realize victory doesn't feel like anything. It's quiet, no more broadcasts, no alarms, no military sirens howling through the night, just silence, not the silence of fear that haunted Terran colonies after the betrayal, but the silence of settling dust. I walk the halls of the tribunal now as an advisor, Bram Halden, former soldier, former fugitive, former ghost, now a name inked on 100 testimonies, a witness. I was never meant to survive this long. Most of my unit didn't. Those who did scattered to the forgotten corners of the galaxy, drowning their rage in drink, in shadow, in exile. But fate, if it exists, had other plans for me, so I stayed. Not for glory, not for revenge. To remember, the tribunal is vast, larger than anything humanity ever built before the collapse. It's constructed with stone and metal from every system that took part in the reckoning. It's a symbol of unity, of truth, and of scars. You can still see them, the jagged edges on the eastern tower, where Gavari engineers refused to smooth the metal, leaving it as a reminder of their people's silence. The black murals painted by Urith artists, depicting the burning of Terran archives, overlaid with the faces of the lost, even the walkways, are uneven not from error, but by design. So no one walks in comfort here. No one forgets. I attend the monthly sessions. I listen as new nations argue over currency standards and trade routes. The debates are mundane. It's tedious, but it's peace, real peace not. Every species was ready for what Bastion did. Some still call us monsters. Assassins, manipulators. They're not entirely wrong. The truth broadcast didn't just break the council, it fractured civilizations. Families turned against each other. Cultures collapsed under the weight of what they had enabled. But those wounds are healing, slowly, painfully, and this time, openly. There are no more secrets now. Wraith disappeared. 3 months after the tribunal was formed, She left no trace. Some say she died. Others claim she returned to the Crucible to train the next generation, not warriors, but historians. Wraith was never meant to lead the future. Her job was to end the past, and she did. Soren, my old friend, my drinking partner, my devil on the shoulder, opened a bar on a free planet called Haver's Reach. It's called the Ember's Wake. He serves soldiers, traders, diplomat, 7 Council washouts. There's a blaster under the counter and a bastion patch over the S. I've visited him twice. We don't talk much about the war, but sometimes, when it's late and the bar is empty, he pours us both a drink and says, "We didn't win. You know?" And I nod, because he's right. We just survived louder than they expected back on Earth. Things are slower. Cities are rebuilt, not in steel, but with care. Gardens bloom where factories once stood. Schools rise where bunkers were buried. Children laugh in the open again, but the scars remain, craters, walls with blast marks. Empty shells of museums bombed by council drones during the cultural purges. No one touches them. They stand like old. Friends, at the edge of civilization quiet, watching, reminding. Earth isn't angry anymore. It's awake. Sometimes, on long nights, I walk along the old Atlantic ruins, what's left of the coastline drowned after the orbital bombardments. Walk alone. Not because I'm lonely, but because some memories demand solitude. The stars are clearer now. The orbital shields that once blacked out the night, Sky Council tech used to track and suppress human signals, are gone, torn down, dismantled, recycled. Into the Tribunal's foundation beams. Some call it poetic. I call it necessary. Let them walk on the metal they once used to silence us. Let their children learn truth. By standing on the bones of lies, the new generation is different. They ask why. Before they ask how they read old Terran history and question it, they don't salute the flags we died for. They plant new ones, smaller, gentler, wrapped in hope rather than fury. They don't want another bastion. Maybe that's a good thing, maybe. Bastion was a blade meant to be sheathed once the blood was drained. Not forgotten, just put away. There are rumors. As always, rogue Terran cells still operating in the outer fringe. Fanatics. People who believe the reckoning didn't go far enough. That every non-human species should pay for standing by while Earth burned. I don't agree with them, but I understand them, and I watch them closely. Because the truth is, we're not above repeating history. No one is. That's why the Tribunal exists. That's why we remember. Because once you forget, the cycle begins again. This morning, I received a message. Encrypted. No sender tag. I knew the style. WRAITH for words. You did it, Bram. I sat with that message for hours, read it again and again, and I realized something. I never wanted to win. I just wanted to end it. The fear. Silence. The feeling that humanity had become a warning sign instead of a civilization. And maybe, just maybe, now we're something better. Not a warning. A reminder that you can't silence a species. That you can't rewrite truth with policy. That when you push a people into darkness, sometimes they don't die. Sometimes they become the fire.